Well, the Indianapolis Colts play a football game on Sunday. That is tomorrow, which is crazy to even think about. But the Colts play their first game of the 2024 regular season. And today, real quick, just wanted to talk about some of my biggest keys to the game for the Indianapolis Colts if they hope to come out of week one against the Houston Texans 1-0. So let's get to it. All right, what is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. So, guys, like I mentioned already off the top, the Indianapolis Colts play a football game tomorrow. They host the Houston Texans off that Week 18 rematch from last year, and obviously a lot going into this game for the Indianapolis Colts. And so today I wanted to kind of talk about what are the biggest keys to the game for the Indianapolis Colts if they hope to come out of that game 1-0, and they hope to go into Green Bay next week looking to potentially go 2-0. But we got to start here with this game for the Indianapolis Colts because obviously major game in the division, a team that sent you packing a year ago. So obviously we know the stakes are at an all-time high for the Indianapolis Colts, and it's going to be a good game. I'm really excited to see what happens here between the Colts and the Texans. And honestly, I know it's only week number one, but, when you come right down to it, this game very well could be major when you look down the stretch towards week 16 and 17 on who maybe controls the division. So with that being said, we're going to jump right into it today, guys. But before we do that, just want to let you guys know and remind you, this episode is presented by Prize Picks. So be sure to visit prizepicks.com today or use their mobile app. And when you sign up, use the code BTJ for a $100 deposit match. All right, guys, let's get right into this game. So I think the biggest thing for me when it comes to the Indianapolis Colts is I think offensively, the Indianapolis Colts offensive line really needs to take control of this game. Houston obviously has some really good players on their defensive line. You talk about, obviously, Will Anderson Jr., who they drafted last year, reigning defensive rookie of the year. He's only probably going to get better in year number two. And then, of course, Houston, one of their biggest acquisitions on defense in the offseason, Danielle Hunter, who was coming off a 16.5 sack season last year with the Minnesota Vikings. And so the Indianapolis Colts are going to have their hands full. They got to do what they need to do to be able to contain these guys, right? So it's going to start with the two tackles, Bernard Ryman, Braden Smith. I think, honestly, when healthy, both of them are top 15 tackles in this NFL. But that's just my opinion. But I think regardless, they're one of the best tackle tandems in the NFL when they're both healthy. And they're going to have their hands full with these two guys who might honestly be in contention for the best pass rushing duo at a defensive end in the NFL as well. So going to be a very big matchup there for the Indianapolis Colts, a big strength on strength there. And we'll see who ends up, kind of winning the day there. I think that's going to be huge, especially when it comes to pass protection for the Colts. And then obviously you talk about their interior, which I believe Houston is a lot weaker in. We've seen already the Colts have been able to take advantage in the past of that weakness in the Houston defensive line in the interior. They've been able to really run the ball very effectively, and they've really won the battle of the trenches in the interior as of recent, right? So Colts need to just do what they do there on the interior and, obviously pass protection, but just, opening the running game for Jonathan Taylor, doing what they do there, and just allowing JT to essentially be JT again, right? I mean, we all know what he did against Houston last year in Week 18, nearly 200 yards rushing. He's got to have a similar performance here where, 4.5, 5 yards a carry, that sort of day. And I think, Houston did a little bit to try to shore that up, but I don't think it's going to be enough. So the Colts must take full advantage of that, right? And they must be able, with that offensive line, to control the line of scrimmage, pass protect, but also slam the ball down Houston's throat with JT and company. And it starts with that offensive line. So I think really winning the battle of the trenches on the offensive side of the ball, and then on the defensive side of the ball, right, the Indianapolis Colts really need to dominate when it comes to their defensive line versus Houston's offensive line, right? And I'll say this, it's kind of interesting when it comes to this because, Houston has a major advantage and a major disadvantage on their offense versus this Colts defense, right? The major advantage that Houston has is they have three receivers, which you could argue with three number one wide receivers, while the Indianapolis Colts have a very young and inexperienced secondary outside of two guys, right? So Houston has the advantage there because, they have C.J. Stroud, who was very good last year, but they have really good receivers who I think could give the Colts fits if they're not careful. But on the flip side of that, when you talk about, the lines for Houston, their offensive line, I'd say if the Colts secondary is their biggest issue, I think Houston's O-line is their biggest issue and the biggest potential exploit for the Colts to take advantage of, right? I really do believe that. Houston obviously has Laramie Tunsil, who is a very good left tackle in his own regards. But other than that, they have some guys that are serviceable, but it's a lot of youth and inexperience, especially in that interior of the offensive line, which the Colts, if there's anything they do well on defense, is they have some dogs in the interior. They have Grover Stewart. They have DeForest Buckner. They have some other guys who I think can come off the bench in the interior. Guys like Adetomiwa Adebaware. They have Raekwon Davis, right? They have some other guys like Dayo Adangbo, Tyquan Lewis, who can, rush from the inside if need be. And also they have some guys on the outside too, who I really think have a chance to dominate. They have Kwity Paye, who has looked really good so far. They have, obviously, Leatu Latu, who they drafted this year, who has been giving, fits to offensive linemen already in the preseason and in training camp. And then, of course, they have guys like Tyquan Lewis, Dayo Adangbo, who I already mentioned, a lot of guys off the bench. So they have some guys that I think can really, disrupt timing. And they're going to need to disrupt timing. So that's kind of one of my keys to the game is like, Houston has a major advantage, at least on paper, when it comes to their wide receivers versus the Colts DBs, while the Colts have a major advantage on paper on their defensive line versus Houston's offensive line. So that's really, I think, where it's going to be, guys, is like if the Colts can make C.J. Stroud uncomfortable, right? Can they make his life a lot more of week 2 last year than week 18 last year, right? Because remember, the Colts in week 2, they were wrecking C.J. Stroud. They were hitting him. They had, 5-6 sacks in that game. They made his life very uncomfortable. But even so, near the end of that game, they struggled. And C.J. Stroud, when he got opportunities, he was lighting them up at the end of that game. And then obviously we know what he did in week 18. So the Colts need to keep C.J. Stroud very uncomfortable all day long, right? The pressure needs to come often, and the pressure needs to come consistently. And if the Colts can do those two things, I think it's going to really help them out in the grand scheme of things. And it won't matter if Houston has all these elite talent wide receivers. If CJ Stroud doesn't have a lot of time, it's going to help your secondary out significantly. So I think that is a big thing for me, is just controlling those trenches, getting pressure on CJ Stroud, making CJ Stroud uncomfortable. And I think, when it comes to that, we know Houston will make plays. Like, that's going to be a thing that's going to happen. But I think with the Indianapolis Colts, if they can possibly do it, is like limit the big plays. Limit the big plays. I mean, honestly, guys, in that Week 18 game a year ago, I really do believe if it wasn't, there was just like one or two big plays that Houston had that ultimately ended up being the biggest deal here, right? So if the Indianapolis Colts can limit those big plays as much as possible, again, they might still happen, but as much as you possibly can, limiting those big busted coverages, those plays, all that kind of stuff that happened last year at times, if they can limit those down a little bit, I think that'll go a long way in this game for them, right? So really it is going to come down, guys, I think in a lot of ways to controlling the trenches on the offensive defensive lines and just, allowing the groups that you have very much invested in to dominate, right? And hoping that they dominate because you've invested way too much for these units not to dominate at this point. Right. And I think of the Colts, honestly, if it starts with that D line and that offensive line, if the Colts can do that well, I really think they have a good shot in this game. I mean, we know guys like Jonathan Taylor, we know Michael Pittman, some of these other guys, we know they're going to make plays for this Colts team. Like, we know they're going to make plays, right? But if the Colts, I think, can start and dominate in the trenches, it's going to help a lot of things out in this game against the Houston Texans. We just want to remind you guys that this episode is presented by Prize Picks. Be sure to go visit prizepicks.com today. Use their app
And when you sign up, use the code BTJ for a $100 deposit match.
Well, guys, with football season finally getting back into the swing of things, first off, we rejoice. But also, guys, when it comes to prize picks, this is going to be a great way for you guys, especially, to check out some of the stuff that Prize Picks has, right? So, for example, when you go into the Prize Picks app, I know one for me that I view as just pretty much stealing easy money at this point is the Jonathan Taylor week 1 against the Houston Texans line right now for yards per for that game. Right now, the line sits at 75 and a half rushing yards. And obviously, if you remember from that final game of the season against the Houston Texans at Lucas Oil, actually, in that winner go home scenario, even though the Indianapolis Colts lost that game, Jonathan Taylor went absolutely off in that game, right? He had nearly 200 yards rushing in that game on 30 attempts, averaged over 6 yards per carry, and had a rushing touchdown as well. And on a whole, the average in the 6 games that Jonathan Taylor has played against the Houston Texans, he's averaged 135 yards per game, right? So the fact that Prize Picks has that number right now so low, in my opinion, for Jonathan Taylor, I think that's something where you clearly have to take the over for him because he has never had a game under 83 yards rushing in his 6 total career games against the Houston Texans. So I think that's one, guys, that you definitely should consider if you're on Prize Picks, and definitely would encourage you to hit the over on that. No question about that. One that's also interesting as I was kind of looking through the stuff for the Indianapolis Colts was Anthony Richardson against the Houston Texans as well. Average is set right now for 208.5 passing yards in that game. And that one's kind of interesting to me because I do think Anthony Richardson can clearly do that, but I'm interested to see kind of how his legs factor into that when it comes to, the total yardage, right? Because I could see Anthony Richardson passing for over 200 yards, but I could also see him passing for right around there and also rushing for 50 plus, right? So that's something you definitely have to consider. So if you're looking specifically for the Colts stuff, that's definitely something you guys should check out. But if you're looking for, like me, more NFL stuff, there's all sorts of stats and stuff that you can check out and make your picks for sure, no question in my mind. And there's definitely guys that are very consistent, like Jonathan Taylor against the Houston Texans, that you really feel like you can probably feel pretty good about overall, right? And there's some other ones where you're like, I don't know if I would take the over on that. I don't know if I would pick them to hit that margin, right? So, guys, be sure to go check out all that stuff on Prize Picks. It's only a couple examples. There's all the different odds that you could hope for when it comes to that for Prize Picks. So I highly encourage you guys to go check that out, but definitely excited for this season, and hopefully you guys will be following along with us and everything with Prize Picks and what they do. I mean, obviously, you need to see Anthony Richardson, do what he does when it comes to throwing the football. You need to see him take advantage. Houston has some pretty good players in that secondary, so just take care of the ball as much as possible. You're going to be without Josh Downs in this game, so that's going to be tough sledding for them. But, take what you can take if you're Anthony Richardson and just, take care of the football. I honestly think if he can do that well, and obviously if there's big plays to be made, we know he can and will make those plays. But, do the routine things well if you're Anthony Richardson, right? Don't put the ball in harm's way if you don't have to. Take care of the ball and take care of yourself if you're Anthony Richardson, right? Don't eliminate the running game with Anthony Richardson. I don't think that's something that, it needs to happen because we saw what he was able to do against this Houston team last year when he was healthy. So if AR can just stay out of trouble, live to fight another down, protect himself, and not always have to play Superman, when it comes to hero ball, all that stuff that we've seen Colts quarterbacks try to do in the past, right? If he can sometimes just live to fight another down, I think that'll be just fine for me when it comes to Anthony Richardson. Obviously special teams is going to be a big factor as well in this game for the Colts. Spencer Schrader right now just got activated to the active roster, here today. So that is something I'm going to definitely monitor, but I think just don't have any special teams hiccups. Do what you need to do. Be solid. If you're Spencer Schrader or Matt Gay, I don't care who it is. right? Just do what you need to do. Make it routine. Don't give Houston the opportunity, to take advantage off of, say you're winning the game and then all of a sudden you have a botched snap or you blow a coverage or whatever it is. You miss a field goal that you should have made. You shank one. Like, just don't let that be a possibility. Don't let Houston get any momentum in this game. Do what you got to do, right, if you're the Colts. So, guys, those are some of my keys here for the Colts. I think, like I said, I think it really starts with that line, the offense and defensive line for Indianapolis. But I also think guys like Anthony Richardson taking care of the ball, not taking out the dynamic aspect of his game, taking care of the ball, taking care of himself while also continuing to do those elements. And then I think really, when it comes to special teams, just, whatever it looks like, just keep it routine, nothing crazy. And then obviously you talk about the secondary, just none of those big explosive plays down the field as much as possible when it comes to limiting those things. So, guys, that's kind of my thoughts on some keys to the game here for the Indianapolis Colts. But really, guys, it's going to be a fun game. I'm very excited. I'm going to be at that game tomorrow, so really looking forward to that. So if you guys are going to be at that game, would love to see you out there and connect with you, maybe grab a picture or whatever. Just connecting with more fans. I think this is honestly the first home opener I've been to in a long time. I can't remember the last time I've been to a home opener. This might be my first time, honestly, which is crazy. So be sure to look for us, guys. We're going to be in the 100 sections. So if you ever want to come say, hey, we'd love to see you at some point. But, guys, it's going to be a fun matchup tomorrow. But those are some of my keys to the game for the Colts versus Texans tomorrow. It's going to be a good one, guys. Let us know your thoughts on this game, guys. Any other keys to the game that maybe I didn't mention that you would throw in there as well? But, guys, that's going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, guys, go Colts.